So our next speaker is Peter Thorns. Peter is the head of strategic lighting applications at Thorn Lighting, and he's going to be talking to us on luminaires and light sources, evolution and future development. Thank you.
Good morning. I would like to thank SLL and LR&T for inviting me, but a little bit in the back of my mind is bitter about the time the alarm clock went off this morning. No. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about lighting and luminaires and optics. And obviously, as soon as you talk about lighting, basically you're talking about fish. Fish were one of the first candles. You would catch a fish, you would shove a grass reed down its mouth, and you would light the grass reed, and because fish skin is so oily, it works like candle wax. And actually there was a little bit of me loves the concept of one child going to bed and the mother shouting down the corridor, "Before you go to sleep, blow the fish out." It would be a wonderful idea. And lighting has slowly developed, partially for efficiency, partially for control, in this case, partially for hygiene. So we got oil, we could burn oil. We started to discover glass, and if you change the shape of the glass, you change the shape of the light. We developed safety. You could walk around with your candle and you didn't burn London down. And then we got gas lighting. And again with gas lighting, we got optics. And it kept moving forward. We got electric lighting. And we're now at the point where we have LED. But fundamentally, they all do the same thing as that fish. They give us light. Because light defines space. It makes it inviting, frightening, exciting, boring. Light creates the space, so whatever we do with luminaires, light sources, we are creating a lit environment where people can be. Sometimes we make the light source part of the lit environment, part of the lit scene. I suspect if you took that and you put in an LED office luminaire, it would lose something. But we're still creating a lit space. So basically, whenever we do lighting, we don't sell light fittings. I always tell my sales force that. They always get very objectionable about it. But we don't sell light fittings. We sell light. And light has come in lots of shapes and sizes. So if we go backwards a bit and start talking about firelight, was it comfortable? Yes. People liked firelight. People still like firelight. Was it efficient? Probably not. Was it sustainable? Definitely not. Was it controllable? Only in the sense that if you knew what you were doing, you didn't set fire to anything else. That was about as good as it got. I'm now going to make a big leap forward. The invention of electric light. You could argue that it was a complete leap of faith, because actually it didn't give very good light, it didn't last for long, the colour was bad, it didn't create a nice space, it was sort of controllable. You could argue sustainability was lower or better. Compared to gas lighting, you could have looked at that and thought, so what? So it wasn't what it was at that moment in time, it was the potential of what it could be. So when we talk about lighting and when we talk about light fittings, we have a few things going on. We have a light source, generally not a fish, nowadays generally an LED. But we have a light source that we will put in a luminaire. The luminaire is there to control everything and keep everything safe. And we have optics. If it's a big light source, I can guarantee it will be a big fitting. If it's a small light source, we can make a small fitting or put lots of them in and make it a bigger fitting. If it's a very bright light source, we will use very good optics to control glare. But it's quite a complicated thing to put them all together. It's not just a box. And you can see where we've gone from the older lamp technologies towards LED. The older lamp technologies had more obviously complex optics. LED optics are complex, they're just quite small now. They tended to be bulkier. You couldn't have the concept where you could just click in extra sections of light and they would be there. They still did have, you could call them the backbone of lighting. So in the centre at the top we have an old Cat2 fitting, for those of you old enough to remember this sort of thing. And just under it we have a flat panel LED, which to be perfectly honest is the new Cat2. But things changed. We can do a lot more with LED lighting. It's giving us more options. So then you have to start asking the question, why aren't we doing a lot more with LED? Part of the problem is established practice. We tend to have a lot of modular ceilings. That is a big restriction on how you do your lighting. We tend to have a lot of embedded infrastructure. People don't like rearranging all the street lighting columns, so they take the existing light fitting off and put an LED one on because it's going to be just as good. I actually had my neighbours come up to me and say they've just replaced the lighting in our street, and they said, can you write a letter to the council, because you understand lighting, to tell them how bad it is? And I went, no. And they went, why not? And I said, I love it. And they said, how can you love this? It's awful. And I said, technically, according to all the lighting standards, it's a disaster. It is little patches of light with big bits of dark in the middle. I love the dark. I like it. They didn't. So established infrastructure, established buildings, they get in the way of a lot of things we could do, as does established practice. You tend to find that technology can move a lot faster than what people will actually accept. But we are making spaces better. I hope you agree. We can take the new technologies and the new practice and actually light spaces better. Lighting design practice has got better. And it's got better partly because we kept finding out how bad it was. So when we first started doing widespread electric lighting, all of a sudden we discovered glare. We kind of knew it existed, but we didn't worry about it. But all of a sudden glare existed. So what did the lighting industry do? It thought, right, if we do large area panels, we effectively get lower luminance, we get less glare, they're not a point source, it doesn't hurt so much. It was correct. So we ended up having large area panels in lots of office spaces. It was effective. Until computers came along. As soon as we had computers, we couldn't do that because you couldn't read your computer screen. There is a little bit of me has always wondered, when computers came along and the lighting didn't work with the screen, the lighting industry went, yes, it's our fault, and didn't go come up with a better screen. But that's not what happened. So all of a sudden, we had to change our lighting. So we started using real control. We had the category system, Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3. We had very dark spaces. It created caves. People didn't like it. And so practice changed again. We started understanding that we aren't just lighting the task, we're lighting the space. You tend to find that every time something happens, It's not just we invent something new, we remember what we should have known before, that people used to do. We light the space. You could almost say that's a first step towards lighting for people. We weren't lighting for the computer, we weren't lighting for the task, we were trying to create spaces that were actually bearable. So lighting has been developing because application made it happen. And that kind of gives us this bit of a pull. At one end, we have a light source, and the light source is saying, you can do all these things with me, but don't try doing that. And at the other end, we have an application that's saying, this is what I need. I don't care what you say you can do, this is what I need, so I can be in a place where I can work and be happy. So all of these things have to work together, and they're all pulling approximately in the same direction, although they do sometimes drift. So we've gone from burning things to electricity. We now have LED. It is a lot more efficient. What's coming next? And like Mike, this is where I started to shy away a little bit. So there is an organisation called Lighting Europe. It's effectively the European Association for Lighting Manufacturers, give or take. It's a bit more complicated than that. And they did a sort of plan looking forward. And they said, what's going to happen in the lighting industry? And it was a selfish viewpoint. It then said, how can we promote it and make sure we make money out of it? But they said, LEDification. Everyone will start moving to LED. They said we have intelligent lighting systems, we have human-centric lighting, and we will have the circular economy. So let's try and pull some of those apart. We'll start with intelligent lighting systems. I have never heard anybody market a stupid lighting system. So then you have to ask, what is an intelligent lighting system? It's probably something that has some decision ability. We have lighting systems already. We can link sensors with daylight, with movement, with whatever we want. I wouldn't have classed them as intelligent. So an intelligent system needs a bit extra. It needs something that makes it decide and not be totally predictable. And it needs a link with the outside world. The idea that your building management system doesn't talk to a lighting system is true, but it should. The lighting system should be able to say, this is what I've done. And the building system should be able to say, this is what you should do. It's also heading towards IoT. Now, I have to admit, IoT frightens me to death. I personally believe that the television remote control was possibly a step too far, mainly because I never have it. But the IoT, I did like Mike's slide on the Apollo 11 moon landing, because it occurred to me, we are going to use more computer technology so that I can walk into a shop and find a tin of beans than we had to land on the moon. And to be perfectly honest, if I need that much technology to find a tin of beans, I'm in the wrong shop. So the IoT intrigues me. And it should worry us. I don't quite go as far as having a little aluminium hat that I stick on my head when I'm at home. But my children are convinced I'm a complete moron when it comes to technology. I do point out that I'm not, and I actually know more about it than they do. But I'm very suspicious of it. So we now have a balance. What do we want technology to do? How much are we willing to give up to have it? And the IoT is starting to bring that to the fore. We will have to think about that. And we will have to seriously think about that. Then we get human-centric lighting. I'm not going to delve into it too much because I know we have another speaker who's going to cover it a lot better than me. But I am going to give my rant on the term human-centric lighting. I'm not quite going to do it as well as Mark did with a scientific viewpoint. I'm going to use a rabbit. So if you imagine standing next to me is a 6-foot-tall, invisible white rabbit called Harvey. And if you know the film I'm talking about, keep quiet, you're too old. So myself and Harvey are going to go for a quick walk. I admit it's a bit narrow, only 6 foot tall, so we're going to walk carefully. But we'll walk down here, and then we'll walk back. When I get back here, myself and Harvey have walked exactly the same distance, because distance is absolute. 1 metre for a human is the same as 1 metre for a rabbit. Now imagine we turn the heating up and it gets warmer. I'll get warmer. Harvey will get warmer, because temperature is absolute. 1 degree for a human is the same as 1 degree for a rabbit. Now I'll turn the lighting down. I will perceive it gets dimmer. Not quite sure what happens to, well, I am sure what happens to Harvey, because I did give this talk once and somebody analysed a rabbit's vision and sent it to me. But, but that was more concerning than interesting. So Harvey won't see the same as me. Harvey does not see light. Light is based on the V-Lander curve, which is based, however correctly or incorrectly, on the human eye. The lumen does not relate to anything except humans. And because light is based on V-Lander, lighting has to be human-centric, so I don't understand how you can have human-centric lighting. And more to the point, if we're talking about non-visual effects, they're actually based on the electromagnetic spectrum, not necessarily the V-Lander curve. At which point we don't want to talk about light anyway. So if we're going to talk about human-centric lighting, we do have to come up with some different measures and different ways of thinking things and totally different ways of doing things. And we probably have to do it with a bit of caution. So that's slagged off the IoT, slagged off HCL. I could get sacked tomorrow. So what about the circular economy? This is very important. It's basically working on the idea that nothing will get thrown away. It will get reused, it will get recycled, there will be no waste. But again, we have to think about it before we do it. If we do that, we can then say there is no such thing as a sealed for life luminaire. A sealed for life luminaire, you have to break it to get the components out. If you have to do that, it's not reusable in any way, shape or form. But then if you think about LED, let's assume I have an office product that will last 50,000 hours. In an office, that's about 20 years. How much will I genuinely reuse in a product that is 20 years old? The technology is out of date. And to be perfectly honest, there is nothing with the same style being made anymore. So to make it so I can disassemble it and actually look after it, I have to put extra clips, extra toggles, extra connectors, all sorts of extra bits to make it disassemblable, based on the principle that 99% of them won't get disassembled. So there will come a point where actually we're putting in more environmental damage to make it environmentally friendly than we're getting back. And we have the other awkward problem. If you start modifying a fitting that was made by my company, wish it was my company, but made by my company, how much can you modify it before it's no longer my fitting? And as soon as it stops being my fitting, then you are responsible for it. My marks and my safety marks don't count anymore. You have to make sure it's safe because you've changed it. And that's a legal minefield that they haven't quite covered yet. And we have the legal side. We have regulations that slowly get rid of inefficient technologies. So the European Union is busy revamping all the regulations to do with lighting, to produce a thing called the Single Lighting Regulation. The European Union has a slight problem with the lighting at the moment, in that they do a domestic regulation and a tertiary regulation, which is essentially non-domestic. But instead of doing it based on the fact, is it in a domestic setting or is it in a tertiary setting, it's based on technologies. So under the EU system, LED technology is a domestic technology. That means if you light your football stadium with floodlights with LED technology in it, they are domestic floodlights, which is a slight problem. So they're pulling it all together and making it more sensible. These are the proposed limits. Those are the lamp types that will disappear. And you can see the limit will vary depending on the lumen output. A side effect of this sort of thing is some of the old technologies disappear. Not because we want them to, not because we're being spiteful, but because legally we can't do it anymore. And just because we've got LED, it won't stop. It will keep developing. The LEDs that we had 5 years ago don't bear that much resemblance to the LEDs we have now. We are developing them, we are changing them, we are learning more about them. So the technology that we have will keep developing. People spend vast amounts of money to come up with new ways of doing it better, cheaper, more efficient, whatever. And they will get cheaper. This is from the US Department of the Environment, and you can see by about 2025, which is the goal point, you're aiming at about $0.3 per thousand lumens. That's cheap. The chances are people won't spend less because it costs less to buy. The chances are people won't spend less because it's much more efficient. The chances are they will use more lights. That's how these things work. And if you want any example of that, you can look at my garden where my youngest daughter has filled it full of so many solar lights, I'm in rebellion. That's how these things happen. Other technologies, OLED. OLED is an interesting technology. It's a one that kind of nearly almost makes it, but never does. You can do lots of fascinating things with it. That is a Luminaire. And it's wonderful. OLED light is not so easy to control optically, so it's a bit harder. And it's still expensive. By 2025, they still believe it'll be about $100 per square metre. So OLED is a great idea. I would love it to come into play because OLED could be an answer to a lot of solutions. As people get older, they become less tolerant of hard light. OLED is a very soft light. I am yet to find out whether it's possible to get glare from an OLED fitting. So as a concept, it's really nice. As a technology, at the minute, unless we make a sudden jump forward, it's never quite going to make it. We have laser LEDs. One of the problems with current LED technology is the harder you drive it, the less efficient it becomes. We have a thing called current droop. You don't get that with laser LEDs. Laser LEDs don't have current droop. You can get a much brighter LED from a very small source. I suspect optics are going to be very important, otherwise you'll get glare. They are very good for things such as Wi-Fi and visual light communications because they're that bright. They will ask some other questions. If you put a laser light source in a light fitting, how do you say it's safe? Do you use lighting standards or do you use laser standards? Do you use a bit of both? If you can disassemble it and put it back together again and miss some piece out, does it then become unsafe? So again, we can move the technology forward, but we'll have to ask a lot of questions on how we use it in application. And then even further into the future, so the top one is the US University in Berkeley, and they invented a light source that is 3 atoms thick. It is transparent until you turn it on, and apparently you can get it in about 4 colours, and it's about 1% efficient. Contrast that to the original light bulb. That's not so bad. And of course we have graphene. We're just starting to learn the possibilities of graphene. The idea that you can put graphene on a chip and it's now sort of an LED but not really an LED. What is it? So we're starting to see some of the new technologies that might make the next breakthrough. But when it comes down to it, it's going to come down to cost. And it's not just costing money, it's costing environment. How much environmental load can lighting put on the planet before things fall apart? And at some point, we might have to change our viewpoint of where lighting comes from. At the minute, we are very electric-centric. We may have to think up of different things, maybe chemicals. Think about the fish with the little lights that glow in the dark. Feels a bit déjà vu when we talk about fish. Or think about how can we store daylight. There are people looking at whether we can compress air during the day using all that extra solar power and then slowly let it out and spin a turbine at night, so you're storing the daylight in a different form to generate electricity later. But at some point we will have to stop relying on straightforward electricity, however efficient we can make it, and come up with something totally different, because we will not destroy the planet. The planet will live quite happily without us. We'll just be extinct. And on that happy note, thank you for listening.